Okay, PPP1 first draw and PPP2 second draw. You can get both, and I have a whole video on PPP2 eligibility because there's some eligibility requirements. But now that the PPP program has been extended all the way to May 31st, we have a lot of people who thought they were they just came into the PPP program. Maybe they weren't allowed really to get a loan until the gross income calculation changed. And now they got their first PPP loan, and then they've been asking, Hannah, can I get a second PPP loan? Well, when the deadline was March 31st, a lot of you were not going to have the time to do it. But now that the deadline has been extended to May 31st, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to get both a PPP1 and a PPP2 loan, as long as you qualify for that second draw, and in the timelines. And I've got a spreadsheet calculator for you so you can play around with it and figure out what works best for you. All right, so we're gonna kind of skip more intro, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and like the video if this is helpful, and let's go ahead and get into the spreadsheet. Okay, so here we are in the spreadsheet that I created for you guys. Really, what I did is I went ahead and just added another tab to the PPP budget planning document that I've been giving out for almost a year now. Really, ever since I created it, I've been updating it along the way. So I went ahead and just created this and added another tab. So if you are on my email list, you will get the updated spreadsheet that will have this new tab in it. If you're not on my email list and you want to be, I will put a link in the description below to get on that. But also, if you go and download this directly from my website, which the link will be in the description below, you will be able to get on that list. And if you just want the spreadsheet and then don't want to be on the list, just grab it and then unsubscribe. It does not hurt my feelings if you don't want to continue having that information from me. Here we go. So we're in the spreadsheet. This is what we're going to use to help calculate the, kind of help you make the decision on how to maximize and get both PPP1 and PPP2. Now, what I want to remind you guys is that you can't just get both unless you've had a revenue decline for PPP2. So I'm just going to point out again that we have this gross receipts. You do have to be eligible for PPP2 by proving out that you have a decline in any one quarter between 2019 and 2020. I have a whole video on it, and I will link it in the video here. It should be kind of floating above my head sometime around now. You can click on that if you want to just go back and make sure that you are eligible for PPP2. But assuming that you are, that you had a gross receipts decline, and you already got a first draw loan, what we're trying to do now is determine, when you can go and get your second one. There's been a lot of false information out there saying that you can apply for PPP1 and PPP2 at the same time and get both loans essentially kind of simultaneously. That is actually false. And the reason that is false is because of this thing that you have to certify to when you're applying for your second draw loan. And I pulled it out here and just copied and pasted it directly so that I could show it to you guys. And when you sign the application form for your second draw loan, you have to certify to this point right here. And it says the applicant received a first draw Paycheck Protection Program loan, and before the second draw Paycheck Protection Program loan is dispersed, will have used the full amount, including any increase, of the first draw Paycheck Protection Program loan only for eligible expenses. So the real key here is that you will have used the full loan amount before getting a disbursement for the second one. So in order to use it, we need to talk about the fact that you have to wait a certain amount of time in order to technically use it enough, because you cannot have properly used your expenses for PPP unless you use them in the minimum amount of time, which is 8 weeks. So you have time. The rules and the whole thing around PPP is that you spend the money in a very specific time window, which is called your covered period. And if you use the money in that specific time period and it's for the actual eligible expenses that are allowed under the program, then you can get it forgiven. So if you don't comply by those rules, then you might not be able to get forgiveness, and you can't get a second draw loan if you're not abiding by the rules, okay? So this is contrary to, there is one lender who is telling people that they can get both at the same time. And I do worry for those people who are trying to go down that path, because I'm concerned that they might be ineligible for forgiveness potentially on some of their loans if they're not doing this within the rules. So what I am trying to do here is to prove out to you guys what you are allowed to do and how to maximize within the rules. Okay. So, what I've done here is I've assumed, and also I've had a lot of people ask right now, do I need to make my covered period 8 weeks or 10 weeks? 8 weeks or 10 weeks. For some reason, those seem to be the only two options, which that's totally not the case. You can have your covered period end anywhere between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. But we're hearing 8 weeks and 10 weeks a lot. So I put that in my spreadsheet here. And I'm also putting in a very key date of 2.5 months, and I'll prove out why. So how is the spreadsheet set up? So the first thing I just put in here is what were your average payroll costs. If you are a sole proprietor, this is coming from your Schedule C. If you applied before the rules changed, it would be line 31. If you applied after the rules changed, it would be line 7, using your gross income or your net income. Either one of those numbers is used as your average payroll cost, and then this automatically calculates your PPP loan amount. So this should match your documentation. What we want to do here is I'm going to run you through scenarios. Let's say you decide that you want to cut your PPP loan covered period off at 8 weeks. If that's the case, you are allowed 8 weeks of that compensation, 8 weeks of that average payroll that we talked about, okay? So this is not your full PPP loan. So if you want to cut your covered period at 8 weeks, it means you can only take up to 8 weeks of owner's compensation if you are a sole proprietor. Now, if you are not a sole proprietor or a partnership or a farmer, and you are, let's say, a C Corp or an S Corp, then you would just take your normal payroll here. This video is really kind of focused around using, maximizing this for sole proprietors, partnerships, and farmers, okay? Now, if you are an S Corp or a C Corp, you would just include the wages in that 8 weeks, whatever your average payroll, whatever you actually paid out, you would put it here, okay? Now, if you're going back to the sole proprietor number, so if you are a sole proprietor and you're trying to apply for forgiveness and you say my covered period is 8 weeks, that means you can take as your payroll cost $15,384.62. Now, that is only 74% of your loan, which is great news because you're over that 60% threshold. However, that means that you have another $5,448 that you need to spend on qualified non-payroll costs if you want to maximize 100% and get full forgiveness. Okay? So, for those people who are cutting off their 8 weeks just to go ahead and try to apply for forgiveness really quickly, that is fine as long as you have qualified non-payroll costs. Otherwise, if you don't, you're not going to be able to get full forgiveness for your loan. If you did not spend this money on qualified things and you try to use an 8-week covered period, you are going to not get full forgiveness because you only spent $15,000 on $15,385 on your payroll costs. Same thing with 10 weeks. 10 weeks is not 2.5 months. If you do the math, they are different numbers. 10 weeks, when you do the math, you take the total, divide it by 52, and then multiply it times 10. That's 10 weeks worth of wages. If you're taking 2.5 months, you divide the total divided by 12 and multiply times 2.5. There are a couple days difference there, and that is making a difference of $1,600 in this case of our scenario here. I'm maxing it out at the $100,000, which is the max you can get for any one sole proprietor, okay? So if you're trying to apply for forgiveness and you are taking a 10-week covered period, then you will have $1,600 that you need to spend on other qualified non-payroll expenses for PPP. All right, now the only way that you can get 100% of payroll costs for your PPP is if you take a 2.5-month covered period, okay? So you need to do the due diligence of figuring out what your 2.5-month day looks like, okay? Make sure you're doing it a little bit past the 10 weeks. So what I did over here is I've given you a little calculator where you can type in your date of disbursement for your first loan. So let's just say it was March 1st, 2021. So if you got a loan on 3/1/2021 and you took an 8-week covered period, then the end of your covered period would be April 25th, 2021. And I've created a little drop down here. So if we did a 10-week covered period, we're looking at May 9th, 2021. Okay, and then we know that 2.5 months is sometime in between. It's a couple days after 10 weeks. So if we want to assume, let's just say a 2.5 months is actually 11-week covered period. It's a couple days extra. But if we want to do that, then you do not want to make your covered period end any earlier than 5/16, or you can do the exact math and figure out exactly what 2.5 months is for you. But you're going to need to go above 10 weeks, and you're going to have to go to the 11 weeks for this calculator, okay? I didn't put in a calculation here specifically for 2.5 months, but you can figure out exactly what that is based on, essentially it would be March 1 and then add 2.5 months, which, if you kind of round up, we kind of are at 5/16. So I would just go for a full 11 weeks just to kind of cover your bases there, okay? So if you were wanting to maximize and get 2 loans, what you would do is you would determine how much non-payroll cost you have. Do you have enough to do an 8-week covered period? Do you have some rent? Do you have significant software costs? Do you have some vendor costs, supply costs that you can include? Now, I have a whole video on what's included in non-payroll costs. Please go and watch that. It will be very helpful to you if you're trying to figure this out. So go and look and see, do you have enough to take an 8-week covered period? If so, that's great. You can go on ahead and apply for another PPP loan after 4/25/2021. Now remember, you don't have to have applied for forgiveness in order to apply for a second draw loan, but you do have to have spent your money on eligible expenses. So as long as you apply and get your money after 4/25/2021, you can go that route, okay? But just make sure that you've spent it all on eligible expenses as of the time that you're going and applying. Same thing. Now, if you are telling me, hey, Hannah, I have no qualified non-payroll costs. I pretty much am just a consultant. I operate out of my business. I have really nothing that I use whatsoever. I need to take 100%. If I want to get the loan fully forgiven, I need to take all of it as payroll costs. Then I would say you have to wait 11 weeks and then you can apply and go and get a second round PPP. Okay. Now, this is more helpful if you got a loan earlier on. Maybe you got a loan in May of last year. Maybe you got it in 2020. Then you are basically scot-free. You can totally just decide when you want to go and apply for a second round loan. But this video is kind of really targeted at those people that were late in the game on getting the PPP, or maybe they weren't eligible until the executive order that changed the calculation of the PPP to gross income. And those people are now coming and flooding in, and they're hoping they can get 2 loans. So that is what this video is really trying to help people with, okay? So if we're looking at that scenario, what is the very latest that somebody could try to apply and get a PPP loan? Get 2 PPP loans. So if you got first draw and second draw. So we're really looking at somewhere around, let's say, really, I'm just going to go ahead and say April 5th. Now, you could probably squeak by and maybe do it April 6th, but the last day to apply for a new loan is May 31st, 2021. And this is if you're cutting it short and only doing an 8-week covered period, which means you need to, if you want to achieve full forgiveness, you need to make sure you have some non-payroll costs. Now, it still might be worth it for you if you maybe don't get full forgiveness. Maybe you have to pay back, let's say, $4,000 of this loan. but you're getting a whole new PPP loan that is essentially for the same amount, and you'll have a longer time period to use it. You can get this one fully forgiven because if you get it, let's say in June, you can use the full 2.5 months to pay yourself over that time. So it might be worth it even for you to cut short your timeline if it means that you can get a whole new PPP loan. So this is kind of just a little bit of the strategy that I want you guys to think about. But it's all about planning, and it's really about like thinking through like, what are these scenarios? Can we get both? How do we do it? When do we need to do it by? And I mean, we're in a situation right now. This is being posted on April 2nd. So if you want to hop on this as soon as possible, you need to get on it. Now, most people who are watching this channel probably already have the first round PPP, but just in case, if you haven't apply ASAP, get that money, and then you're going to try to turn around as quickly as possible. If you do get the money quickly, you will be able to consider, applying when you get to the very end of May. I need to caveat all of this to say there might not be money by the end of May. This is a first come, first serve program. There may not be any funds left in the coffers by this point in time, but hey, we're going to assume the last time the program ran out, there was still some money there, and most of the big guys have all gotten their money. So now it's just the little guys trying to get this. So it's going to be dwindling down much slower than it was the first time around. So there may be money at the very end, and you can go and try to apply for this, for these loans. So hopefully you've already applied for PPP1, but if you haven't, I hope you get on this as soon as possible, and we will go from here. Now, let's just say, for some reason you don't get the money until April 10th. Maybe you applied today, but you're not going to get the money until April 10th for your first round loan. What this says is that you can't get a second draw paid. The loan cannot be disbursed until you have your full loan amount has been used. So it is possible. I would go ahead and maybe even if you apply slightly before the end of your covered period, it's still going to take a number of days before your loan could be dispersed. So, you're running into a really tight timeline there where it's going to be a matter of days, and it's going to be a little bit touch and go. But if you believe, let's say you get a loan at the beginning of April and you're kind of not quite sure whether or not you're going to get it, you could go ahead and apply by May 30th, May 31st, and then it'll probably, by the time the funds are actually dispersed into your account, you probably will have met that 8-week that 8-week threshold, that 8-week requirement. So that's something to think about as well. All right. Well, I hope this is super helpful to you. Please make sure you download this spreadsheet. Again, the link to download will be in the description box below. This spreadsheet is also got in here ways for you to track your spending, so you can make sure that you're using the PPP and you're planning for it appropriately. It also includes places for you to include all of your expenses, and talks through some of the available expenses that you can use for payroll versus non-payroll. And then I have a tab for Schedule C, and then I have a tab. This is my corporations tab, and then I have a tab for Schedule C. Okay, and it's been updated to show the line 7 gross income calculation. And we've got a little bit about owner's compensation and maxing out that, and then make sure, if you are not sure if you're eligible for PPP with the PPP2 with the gross receipts decline test, you can go ahead and fill out all that information here. Okay, now remember, I've made this spreadsheet available for download because I think it will be helpful to a lot of you. Just plug in your numbers and it will do all the work for you. You can pick your covered period, super helpful. Please be sure to download it. There is a link in the description box below if you want it. So I hope this is super helpful and helps you figure out how to maximize the PPP program based on your specific dates. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already, and please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Thank you, bye.